Hey everybody, I'm Rick Beato. I recently got to sit down with Matt Pinfield, a true legend in the music world. From his years as a groundbreaking rock radio DJ to hosting 120 Minutes and other shows on MTV, to working behind the scenes in A&R discovering new artists, Matt's career has touched just about every corner of the industry. Earlier this year, he made an inspiring recovery from a stroke, and he's back doing what he loves. I've been friends with Matt for years, and he recently stopped by the studio to catch up. Before we get started, don't forget to hit subscribe. Here's my interview. Matt!
Yeah. Rick, it's so great to see you.
Great to see you. When I heard that January 6th that you had a stroke, honestly, I talked to people that are friends of yours and everything, and I don't know how to say it, but they expected the worst.
Yeah. The prognosis was...
The prognosis was not good.
Yeah. I mean, they expected me not to survive. And of course, I didn't find this out till I was fully awake a couple months later. But, I found out that they had, called my youngest daughter and her mother, they were in Florida, and said, you need to come out and say goodbye now. And my other daughter was already in Los Angeles. But, and a lot of my friends were there and staying in touch with people, our mutual friends. But, it was just, it's one of the strangest things. You do really look at your mortality in that way.
Did you have any sense that anything was coming on
Yes.
In the week before or anything?
Not the week before. What's really strange is a couple days before I was at a memorial at the Rainbow for a friend named Bobby Carlton, who did A&R years ago, signed like Ugly Kid Joe, and grew up with the two brothers, with Robert, who was recently out, you had on, and Robert and Dean DeLeo.
Yep.
So he's like, we're all guys who grew up in Jersey, even though I was born in Athens, Georgia.
Yep.
But I went to his memorial because he'd gotten sick, and I got a weird stomachache a couple days before, but everything else, I the day before I had gone to like an LA Rams game. I'd gone to a birthday party on that Sunday night. And that Monday was like just another day where I was, tracking some stuff for my radio shows. And I went to a friend's house that night, a drummer, and I literally went up these rock stairs, which were like in the Beechwood Canyon area of LA. And it's, he's a drummer who's in the Cult now, but used to be in, White Zombie, John Tempesta. And I was over there helping him with some tech stuff.
Yeah.
And I got over there and I looked at him and I said, I feel kind of strange. And I looked around and the next thing I remember is I'm trying to get myself up off the ground.
Okay.
And so I'd fallen and collapsed. And we were Zooming with some friends. So, one of my friends, I think like Art Alexakis from Everclear actually saw me fall. And went,
okay.
What, and then he and a neighbor worked on getting me back up on a couch. And eventually they had gotten me to, they finally called the EMS and they came and they had to go all the way up these rock like stairways that were all up in the, cause it's like, it's a canyon and they carried me down. And the last thing I remember is getting in the back of that ambulance. And then 2 months go by. Which is insane, to know that not only was I in a coma for a good part of that, but also people were saying that there were a lot of people that I guess had visited the hospital. Some at some point said they had conversations, but I had absolutely no memory of that. So I don't remember anything after getting in that ambulance to go into the hospital for 2 months.
When you came out of it, was it gradual, or did you just all of a sudden come back online?
They said that it was one of those things where there was a guy in the hospital who was like, they had tried many things to make me conscious, bring me to wake me up, every other kind of stimulation imaginable, and all of a sudden, I guess there was somebody who was an aide in the hospital who had been poking my foot with some kind of instrument, and that's what the story was. But because I gradually regained, like my memory. It took a while for me to, because what was so crazy, Rick, was I contracted MRSA pneumonia in the hospital, which, I mean, somebody told me recently, I had heard it was like at least 50% of people who contract that die. But somebody said, no, it's like 85%. And this was another medical professional goes, no, it's very much a miracle that you survived this and came out of it. So I had been very, very sick, and like I said. So when I finally came to, it took me a little while, but of course, you know me. I wanted to, see my friends, my loved ones, and music, of course, was the first thing. And there was a conversation that I had, because you being a producer and a musician will appreciate that. I guess I had the song "A Whiter Shade of Pale" in my mind, by Procol Harum, and I was telling the people in the room that were there about the connection between the producer, Guy Stevens, who had been at a party in England, and some people, Gary Brooker and some of the people from Procol Harum were there. And literally he said to his wife, "You've turned a whiter shade of pale." And that,
wow.
They heard him say that and thought it was really interesting for a song title and a lyric. And the thing about Guy Stevens was, the guy who came up with that, was that fast forward, he produced Mott the Hoople, but he did a lot of work for Island Records. He was an A&R guy and a producer. So he produced a lot of early Mott the Hoople stuff. And, but then of course he produced The Clash, London Calling. So that was I just did this kind of connect the dots from Whiter Shade of Pale to London Calling, and my friends were like, "I still got his music memory," or at least part of it. So that was a beautiful thing.
Now, was the one side of your body, was it right side of your body?
It's this right side, and I still am. There's still absolute lack of feeling in a lot of it. I'm left-handed, so that was one of the things that was good.
That's actually beneficial for people with strokes, I've heard.
Yes,
being left-handed.
Yeah, it is. So for me, this, I have there are parts of my face like where there's lack of feeling here, but you really can't tell.
Yeah.
Which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, sadly, have had a lot worse situations. Strokes are so uniquely individual with everyone who has one that you really don't know what's going to happen. And because, my hands were like, it was crazy. They had like clothes on my hands. I just heard all this stuff afterwards.
Yeah.
But I still have a lot of lack of feeling on my right side.
When you woke up, could you move your right arm at all? Or
it's hard to say now, but I know I couldn't for a very long time.
Okay.
And I couldn't open my hand. Now I can open my hand. Now I can grip it. I always loved John Fogerty and loved Creedence growing up. I love so many things. I mean, it's like obviously you and I love so much music, from so many different eras. And that's the beauty of music, is what a gift it is.
Yeah.
So when I got the opportunity to introduce John Fogerty on stage, weeks back at the Hollywood Bowl, which was, for me, you always think of the Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl, and then, it's the great, one of the greatest venues. So bringing him on stage was an incredible gift, but also while I'm on the side of the stage, I also I start realizing I can actually clap again, which was a small victory because I couldn't clap. When I first came out of the coma, I couldn't open my hand, and it's slowly some of the grip is coming back. But I've done acupuncture and I've done so many. I
see you working out on your Instagram. What is the activity, with building muscle back, and how does it help reconnect with the brain?
It does, something? Yeah, because what it is anything that you can do. It's motion is really what it's all about, and for me, you need to create new neural pathways. Which also you gotta make sure you eat nutritious foods, and you gotta really pay attention to the things that you're doing, and so. I still have a lack of feeling on a good part of my right side.
Yep.
But I'm walking again. I mean, like I said, it was crazy. They said I would never walk again, that I would never speak again. Medical professionals had told my daughters that I was likely going to be in a vegetative state for the rest of my life, and that I was going to probably have to go to a facility. And so as soon as I went from the one hospital in Los Angeles, where I was for 2 months, I went to a rehabilitation hospital where I just did as much physical therapy as they would let me do. I mean, and they would say to me, you're really motivated. This is good, because not a lot of people get very discouraged.
Sure.
And which I can understand, but I was like, there was no way I was going to give up. So I just kept, doing as much physical therapy, and it slowly got to where I could, walk with a walker and then a cane. And, now, and then I went and stayed with some family for a little while. And I was doing physical therapy, and the physical therapist said, you know what, you can walk a bit, you should just continue to do so. So, I rely on a cane only when I need it, and I keep it around because it's so important to have something, especially with stairs or stepping in and out of cars or stairways. But I was, even in the rehabilitation hospital, I was like learning how to walk again in the stairwells, like, literally holding on the rail and realizing that your left foot is your strong foot. So like there's all these things that I've been relearning, and but I've been very blessed and I'm so grateful to have relearned a lot of the things, and it's slowly making small inroads and victories every day,
Did your voice sounds totally normal.
Which that was the incredible thing. It wasn't at first. I mean, people were like, you sounded like the Godfather. I was whispering to him, sounded like, like Marlon Brando for a while. They said like, yeah, and eventually it came back. And that's because, there were tubes down my throat.
Yes.
I had ventilators that I was on. And, there was also worry that, that was never going to heal correctly. But the beauty was that in a short period of time, when people had come to visit me in the hospital, like, dude, they could put a microphone in front of you right now to do your radio shows. And our mutual friend, Leslie Frem, when I got on the phone with her, and she's like, your voice is still
Sounds
there.
Exactly the same.
Which I was so grateful for.
Yeah.
Again, I realize how blessed every moment I have is, and the thing that, music has always been such the driving force in our lives, Rick, right? I mean, there's nothing more important than the gift and the beauty I get from music and from good people in my life.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for those friendships and those experiences, but it's amazing how my voice came back, and I just, I'm doing the radio shows again, and I'm able to do what I love, which is talk about music, because that's like, it's always been the thing that's driven me. You and I love it, and you're, like I said, I so enjoy engaging and talking. Like I love talking about music with you and watching you do interviews and watching you play and do things. That's what is still my passion and has been since I was a young kid. It's what I love so much, But I've been at a great gift of people being there and being encouraging during all of this.
Matt, how did you get from Athens up to Jersey?
So here's it. So my dad and my mom were both from Jersey. There's a town that George Clinton lived in for a long time called Plainfield, New Jersey.
Yeah, I know Plainfield.
So that's where my parents were both born.
Okay.
And we were, I came from a family, they were both, obviously, they were poor, growing up in that period of time. They were born in, they both lost, my mom and dad lost their dads very young. My mom's dad died when she was 3 of strep throat because there was no penicillin yet. And then, my father's father died in a car crash in Rahway, New Jersey. So, it was one of those things where, they just ended up working very hard. But my dad had served in Korea, and then he'd gone in the Marines, I think, and then on a GI Bill, he came to Athens, Georgia, and went to school at UGA.
Wow.
So I had a sister born in Albany, Georgia, and I was born in Athens. You know what I mean? And my
you
brother,
were born when he was in school.
Yeah, I was born like when he was finishing school.
Incredible.
My dad. Yeah, and so, which was why I've always loved, it was amazing as a kid, a kid in high school when the Athens scene started to happen, and there were these independent singles like the B-52s. I saw the record, I saw my Athens, Georgia. I got to buy this. It was an independent record store. It was amazing, right?
Right.
So it was, Rock a Lobster and 52 Girls. And then, from the Bongos, this band from Hoboken who I was playing on my college radio show, they're like, hey, we told our friends from this new band REM that you were from Athens. So they gave us their Hiptone single to give to you to play on the air. And that was, there was the connection to the Athens music scene through that, because, the whole independent scene in the beginning of the 1980s, late 70s. But yeah, so my parents, they ended up, my father got a teaching job, because he was, he literally majored in physics, and they wanted him to continue his education because he was extremely bright. But he had a family, and he's like, well, no, I'm going to go to work now. So he decided to be a teacher. So our first 2-family house in New Jersey when we moved from Athens didn't even have a phone. They didn't have a phone at that period of time. And do you know what? Because you and I are both music fanatics and we love music, and you're a musician. Whiplash, the movie, right, which was about the drummer. When he flips his car, Miles Teller is in the car and it flips on the way to his competition in that town, Dunellen. I was living there. That flips in front of the house we lived in.
Oh my gosh.
Is the craziest thing. So I'm with my oldest daughter watching that movie in the theater. I go, oh my God, that's the house I lived in as a little kid. It's right.
Oh my God.
And so.
And you said the exact house, right?
It was the exact house because it goes right past it, and then the car flips on the street on there in Dunellen. And eventually we moved to this town called East Brunswick, which is by Rutgers University. Yeah. So a couple of years later, my parents could buy a fixer-upper house. And that's where I grew up loving radio and loving music But my earliest memories are, when I was 3 or 4 years old, sitting in front of a turntable with, my brother and older brother and sister where 45s would drop. The 7-inch vinyl records would drop on the thing, and I was just obsessed from the time I was a child. I just wanted to hear music day and night, and and then I loved radio, and because you could find more music on there, you know what I mean? And we didn't have much money, you know what I mean? So I mowed lawns, I delivered papers, I did shoveled driveways of snow for anybody to collect money so I could buy records when I was a kid. I mean, that's what I was all about. I mean, like anyone else, I'd go outside and play with kids, but I loved music. Was my passion from the time I was a child.
So you got into college radio in the 80s?
Yeah. So in 1978, there was a pledge drive at the Rutgers radio station, and I was just 16 or so, just turned, and my friends got together and actually put some money together, Matt, and I pledged to be on the air for an hour, and then they kept me on for 2 hours. So kid, you're pretty good. Uh-huh. So, so I did this radio show, which I found the cassettes of. One of them snapped because it's, so old, it's from 78, but the other one still plays, and it's unbelievable. It's my first ever on-air radio show, and it was unbelievable. And I was playing things like, everything from Elvis Costello to, and, Do Anything You Want to Do by Eddie and the Hot Rods to, it was just so diverse what I was playing on there at that period of time. And because I just love so much different music, and I still remain in that way today. I mean, I think because my friends in high school, like the Dead, I played a Dead song for them, and some other, I played Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, who at that point, nobody was playing that stuff in New York City, where most of our radio was. Nobody was playing the first album or the second album. Maybe there's one station that played the second album all the way through one night, but I was in love with Tom Petty, and I was like, you guys got to listen to this guy, when I was in high school, and he was, brand new. I bought a row of seats to go see him play at the New York Palladium.
So MTV started in 81. You started there in 95.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. 93 was my first fill-in show.
Okay.
So I did an episode with Depeche Mode, but 95 is when I started there.
Were you an avid MTV watcher? Of course you were.
Well, yeah, like anyone else, I definitely was so fascinated with video as a medium for music, and I started watching it, but it was weird. It wasn't everywhere when I started. So we had neighbors that were my friends from other towns. I was at this point when it started, I was already starting in, to go to college and stuff. So I would have my friends tape 6-hour VHS tapes and then watch and find cool stuff on there.
Amazing.
So, it was a great, to get to work there was unbelievable. I mean, I started, in an alternative rock radio station that was one of the first independent, like 13 or 14. I remember when you and I and Leslie were talking about early alternative radio here. That was the thing, but I had found out, I was programming. I won these 2 awards for Alternative Music Director of the Year, this thing called a Gavin Award. So I won it for 91 and 92. And in 93, the MTV people in the music department used to call me up because they trusted that I was going to be honest with them to track records and also go, hey, is there any real heat on this? We're getting hyped on this record. So, I mean, I was definitely, they looked at me as one of their sources just to get a barometer.
You're getting hyped on it. I mean, people are telling them that it's and they say, is this actually getting?
Yeah, that's what they were asking me. Like, does anybody really care about this? Are you getting any heat? Are you noticing your listeners calling about this? So that's what my introduction was. So I ended up meeting a bunch of the program people, like of the 10 that programmed MTV's music. And I became friends with this guy, Kurt Stefik, who I ended up, and the whole group, like I knew Louis Largent from radio. He had come there from Los Angeles. And then eventually I went to this barbecue and met Andy Schoen, who was the guy who hired me at MTV. And they took a risk. Originally they put me on as a fill-in with Depeche Mode. Can you imagine? Never been on TV before.
But I'm Matt Pinfield. I'd like to introduce you to tonight's very special guests, Dave and Martin from Depeche Mode. It's good to have you here. Excellent. Thanks for coming by. Now, it's been 3 years since the massive success of Violator.
Never been on a camera. Nobody had equipment to do that. I had been on cameras, but not like that. Never doing anything like that. But I was a radio guy, but I just thought, listen, why not give it a shot? Because
were you nervous or no?
A little bit. I was like, when I did my audition, I was like, I definitely had cotton mouth, and I'm not a weed guy.
And what was the audition like?
The audition was wild because my friend went with me and he goes, dude, you wore a Morrissey t-shirt with a hole in it. It was like, you went to your audition with a hole in your shirt. And it was just so funny. And I was like, I went and did this stuff and they had me doing like throws to videos. But it was because they used to track records to me. So I said, I read in a music trade because back then, there were, these were actually magazines that monitored radio before they could actually do these things with what they call BDS and just like they can now with streaming. So I literally read that Dave Kendall, who hosted 120 Minutes, had left the show. So I called up Kurt Stefik and I was just being very, very, I wasn't cocky at all. In fact, I didn't think I'd have a shot at all that a short, bald, chubby guy from Jersey was going to end up on MTV. It was like not even in my thought process. Right. But next thing you know, I call him and I go, hey man, so what happened with Dave Kendall? He goes, I don't know. I think he goes, it looks like they blew him out for something. And years later, we heard he was smoking in his office and it might have set a garbage can on fire or something. Because Kurt Loder used to smoke in his office all the time. But it was, regardless, it was one of those situations where I said, this came out of my mouth, Rick. I said, you know what? You guys need somebody who really knows the music and artists are going to respect that can do good interviews.
Absolutely.
And just expecting the pushback to be, oh, Matt, and I said, somebody like me, I said that. Yeah. And Kurt, you know what he says to me at this point in time, right? So it's like late 20s, early 30s, is right. I'm right at that cusp. And he goes to me, well, I don't know if they'll think you're in the demo, but let me kick the idea around here. So I'm like, really? And so he calls me back an hour later and goes, they want you to come in for an audition. And I was like, oh my God. I mean, I was like blown away that, I'm going to get an audition to be on MTV, which was, of course, pushing all the boundaries of pop culture. That's like the biggest
gig you can get.
It is the biggest gig, yes.
Biggest gig you can get in music.
I do this audition, I'm thrown to videos, and I'm nervous.
Did you even know what to do for an audition? Did you have any friends that said, no, you're going to do this? And
well, yeah, what's interesting? This guy named Steve Leeds, who, worked at record companies for years, and, he's done a lot of consulting now, but he was also in charge of a lot of the music people at Sirius. He was doing that for years. But he was a promo guy who did the promo on The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway back years ago, wearing like a sign, like unfair to lambs or something like that, on a street. Like a very interesting background. He actually started U68, which was New York, New Jersey precursor to MTV. So he went, because he was a promo guy, working with U2 and some other bands that I really like the Wonder stuff and all these bands at the time, that he worked at Polygram, in late 90s. He was like, well, I was involved in the first VJs being hired, so I'll go with you to the audition. So he shows up, my friend goes with me, who has a comment about my shirt in the hole. And I'm a little nervous. I won't lie. You know what I mean? And one of the young ladies.
And you're on a set, right?
I'm on a set in their actual studios where you saw everybody back then.
All right.
So I'm there and I'm like, I did my best. And I go, and then I call Kurt and I go, hey, any way you can get me a VHS of my audition? I'm thinking, I'm never going to get a call back ever. So
I want
to copy this thing of me like in the studio so I can say, hey, I auditioned once for MTV at that period of time. And I'm like, and so what happens is all of a sudden I get this call and they weren't in a hurry. Artists were hosting, but some of the artists, were, it just wasn't their cup of tea. They're it's they'd rather be interviewed, and and their thing is making music. So eventually they go to me. I get a phone call, and they're going, "Hey Matt, Depeche Mode are coming in, and they don't want to host the show.
Okay.
So we're going to give you that one shot to do it." And I'm like, oh my God. So I go in and yes, I was nervous.
But wait, so you get on with
Depeche, yeah.
Wait, so you get to the studio that day.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, wait, can I do this? Or
Yeah.
is that going through your head? Or
Well,
what
I was thinking I could do it, but I was like, God, I hope I don't mess this up.
Yeah.
And it was so crazy, Rick, because those guys, constantly British bands would fly in.
Yeah.
And like the first thing they would do like the next day or, would be go to the studio and either be the first guest of the day or the last person they shoot.
Yeah.
And it's early morning and, they seem a little burnt. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like Dave Gahan's very friendly, the singer.
Yeah.
But Martin Gore, who's just, obviously a musical genius and is great, he's kind of looking off. And if you go on YouTube and look at this episode, it's got him like going like, and I'm just sitting there thinking, Martin, please look at me. Please look back at me. You're going to kill this TV thing before it starts. And, eventually, it got his attention, but it was like really unbelievable because I remember like the woman who was, kind of one of the people in charge of the VJs called me up and going, you did a fantastic job. And she's British too, like that. And she goes, with Martin Ball, because he was just out of it. That's what she called him. And I love Martin. But, years later, I got to tell him and joke with him and go, Martin, man, you almost killed my TV career before it started. He would laugh at me and go, Matt, I'm sorry about that. I'm like, oh, I'm just fooling around. I was just telling him fooling around. But he and Dave, were just, and then years, but it was, so I got to do it the one time. And then this is the craziest thing.
Wait, when the thing ends, when you finish your spot with them, the interview, then what? Did people immediately come up and say, oh, that went really well?
Well, I think some of the people in the studio did, but it was so overwhelming, I will be honest, the first time, because I was a radio guy in Jersey, you know what I mean? But I remember so it airs that Sunday night, and I was DJing at clubs to make a living besides, I was doing radio. Yeah. But radio didn't pay much, of course. It still doesn't, but, depending on who you are. But it's like one of those things that I ended up watching. We watched the show at the nightclub that I usually spun at. Okay. You know what I mean? Yeah. At the bar there in New Brunswick, New Jersey by Rutgers. And I remember just, I was pretty, critical of myself because I did look a little nervous at times and I was doing my best in a medium that I had never worked in before. And, like I said, the woman, her name was Lauren Levine, called me up and told me she thought I did a good job. And then I got a call from Andy Schoen, one of the head of music programming and the head of VJs, all that stuff. And I'm thinking, he wants me to come in. I'm like, wow, that's a really good sign because why would they ask me to come in if they weren't going to give me the show? Right away. And so I go there. Yeah. And I happen to the same day, I'm going to go do a gig, an interview with Mike Scott of the Waterboys for like an interview disc, right? And they're like, you're going to have to, produce this yourself, Geffen told me. But, and you can do that at the radio station, wherever you do your thing. But so I'm like, I go to see Andy first. And I get in his office and he says to me, Rick, he goes, Matt, you were great there, but we're going to give the show to Lewis because we think he needs we want to give him more of a profile, on the channel. And my heart sunk. I was like, oh, shit. I go. And then I'm like, Costa, also, you were on TV, so then everyone in your area, like in the listening area, everybody's like, well, is he going to get the gig? And it was one of those things. And they were like, look, and he said, well, you choose a backup. You want to know you, but we thought you did a great job. But of course, my heart's sank. I'm walking down the streets in New York City, heartbroken. Oh man! I just feeling like feeling like just like feeling horrible. Like, how do I explain this to everybody? Oh, how am I going to do this? And then basically when it did come time to tell people, I just said, they said they're going to use me as a backup and Lewis is going to do this. So fast forward, a few months later, and I find out I'm out eating dinner with with the people from the music department because I become friendly with them.
Yeah.
And I'm looking to make a move from the Jersey Shore because, I'm like, I'd won awards and I'm a program director, music director, and they were like, Matt, it was people like Steve Leeds and Tom Cotter, and people that were like in Leslie's position.
Yeah.
They were like, man, you got to move to a different market so you can, and at that point they had a thing called BDS, as you know,
yes,
which monitored the amount of airplay. And it was becoming such a powerful force that the music trades that used to be the way that you would report to a magazine and give them your playlist, and you couldn't really, that became obsolete basically because they could monitor it.
That's right.
But the market on the Jersey Shore, they didn't have the BDS system yet. It was only in mostly major markets or certain parts of the country.
Yeah.
So everybody's like, you got to go to a market where they can monitor your BDS or you're going to and I was like, okay. So I interviewed for a couple gigs. But while I was having dinner with them, I go, there was Patty Galuzzi, was one of my bosses there, who married Steve Lillywhite, believe it or not. She was Steve Lillywhite's second wife after Christy McCall. And she was like, she goes, you would leave HTG? And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I'm making like $2 an hour. I'm like, I could do any other like fast food job and make more than I make as a manager in the station and doing my show. But, they had another opening. She was on a board for BRU, in Rhode Island, and where she had gone to college at Brown, and they paid PDs there, and it would have been a little bump in salary, whatever, because it wasn't much of a bump. But I was going to consider that, and all of a sudden she calls me up and goes to me, Matt, there's 3 people leaving the MTV music department, and we were thinking you might be a good person for this, and Andy Schoen, who had really gotten to know me at a barbecue earlier on, was like, he said, right from that time we were there and we were talking about music, I thought, we got to find a way to work with you. And it was the greatest thing ever because Patty and Andy called me and I was on the phone with them. And then, I went in for an interview. I went and interviewed for that position to be in the music department. And that was a dream job because you're going from, small to medium market radio on the Jersey Shore in Asbury to literally all of a sudden you're helping pick the music for an entire channel.
Yeah.
MTV, which was so powerful. And that was, MTV
was so powerful.
It really
everything.
was. It was unbelievable. So I go and I interview for this job. And I remember it was funny because even though being born in Athens, Georgia, being raised in New Jersey, this Irish, English, Italian kid from Jersey is like, I'm talking with my hands, you know what I mean?
Right.
I remember an interview and I'm thinking to myself in the interview going, man, I think I'm moving my hands a little bit too much during this interview. I'm like,
where should I put my hands?
Yeah, and it was like, I remember doing that. It was so funny.
You're so self-conscious.
It was so self-conscious about it. But then I'm interviewed for the position, and at this point, I want you to know, Rick, I never expected to be on TV again. And the thing that was really important to me was that they didn't think I had some hidden agenda, because I didn't. You know, like I loved radio so much, and I loved HTG, the station on the Jersey Shore. But I needed to make a move of some sort. I had a young daughter, you know what I mean? And I was, so I do the interview, and all of a sudden they said, well, you're going to get a call from Andy Schoen. And at our radio station, Rick, there's only 3 phone lines. So I'm at this station that's in a house on the Jersey Shore that has like an AM station that is like, Dawn to Dusk that's playing like, big band and stuff like that, and beautiful music. And then the FM station, which was playing like, like alternative and rock, kind of like a mix of things. It was, and all of a sudden I'm like waiting for this call. I know they're going to call that day. And I'm like sitting there going through this whole thing where I was on the air, and then I'm waiting for the call in the afternoon because I was on middays at that point, I think.
No.
Or it might have been afternoon drive. I can't remember, but the phones were busy the whole time. Because the sales department is in the basement, the production office, the receptionist.
Yeah.
So of those 3 phone lines, like I'm like, oh no. And I'm just sitting there going, they're gonna change their mind. They're never gonna. They're not gonna be able to get through, and they're gonna change their mind, and it's gonna end before it started. If this, because I didn't know that they were definitely gonna offer me the job. I didn't know what it was.
Right.
All of a sudden, Andy gets through on the phone. This is 2.5 hours after he's supposed to call, and he goes, "Matt, I've been trying to call you for 2.5 hours."
Of course.
And I go, "Oh yeah, Andy. There's only 3 lines here." He goes, "I'll tell you what. Come work for me at MTV, and I'll make sure you have more than 3 lines."
Wow.
And that was the line that he said to me, and that was the life-changing statement that changed my life completely.
Yeah.
And so then eventually I had to let the owners know that, because I was PD.
Yeah.
And at that point, MD, and I had like an assistant MD, because when the PD before me, who came from Washington, D.C., HFS, this guy Michael Butcher, when he had left, they wanted me to just move into the PD position. But I had to let them know.
Hey,
I got this. What's the job? I'm gonna get to program this. It was so exciting.
Yeah.
And it was also one of these things where you on a table like this, little kitchen table. I go back to my place that day. I get off the air, and I remember staying on the air for 8 hours on my last day, so that I could just play these sets of music nonstop. And I remember, it was. I just loved radio so much, but at this point, I never thought I'd be on the radio again, let alone MTV.
Yeah.
But I was so happy that I was going to have this opportunity to help program the channel. And so I got hired as manager of music programming. It was one of the 10 positions, and it was an incredible experience for me. And I loved it. But I got to tell you, Rick, I went home and I had that kind of feeling like that there's, something died at the same time. Is something new and exciting is going to happen.
Yeah.
So, I went and I started working there and going every day. And I was very, very grateful to have that platform to help bands, because that was the kind of thing that was so cool. As a radio guy, I loved artists. I wanted to be able to fight for them, to get buzz clips on the channel and just to get airplay. So it was, what an exciting, jump.
Did you have
that
people
was.
lobbying you all the time, label people?
Well, here's the thing.
How did that?
I want to tell you
this.
this, what's really interesting, because my position, luckily, I was one of the guys, I was an at-large guy. Okay. So where a lot of the other people in the music department had labels assigned to them, any of them could call me and just say, "Hey, man, what do you think of this?" But it wasn't like I had someone beating me down every day. People,
because they literally would beat those other people down, right? Label people.
Oh,
hey, you got to add my video. You
nonstop. And we would get that stuff too. Like I will never forget. There are moments that are just really incredible. Like where you had a major effect on someone's career. I mean, obviously, I remember. Fighting to get 311 a buzz clip, and I remember one of the people in the meeting going, "What are you on drugs?" I'm like, "Well, not today, but But and then Andy Schoen going, "We're gonna make that a buzz clip for 311 on Matt's Passion Alone," like things like that were beautiful. Like or I remember the record companies all giving us shit for staying behind Radiohead. They were like, "Why do you keep adding videos from this Benz album that our album sold an extra 10,000 that week or 20,000?" And we were like, "But it's great videos and it's great music and it's great art. And so we're sticking behind this."
Wow.
And one of the beautiful things about that was when they came in and gave us the gold records for the Benz, Tom York came up and stood in a circle with me, Andy Schoen, and Louis Largent. And he looked at us and he said, Tom York goes, "I know you guys took a lot of shit for sticking behind this record." He goes, "I just want to tell you how much this means to me." And he broke into tears.
Yeah.
Tom York cried. It was beautiful. And Andy looked at me and Lewis and goes, "Man, this is why we do what we do. And it was a really beautiful moment. You know what I mean? And I'll never forget that. And it's just
it's pretty funny to think of other labels saying, "Why are you playing this Radiohead band? We're getting way more,"
And that's what they were saying. They were calling up and hammering all the other people like, "Look, my record sold an extra 5,000 this week than that one, or 10,000. And it was, luckily, the great news was, because of 120 and what would eventually become Matt Rock, which was my version of Headbangers, because Andy was but there were places to play a lot of things.
I want to talk about this, since you mentioned Headbangers. This predates you there,
Headbangers Ball was, so I did, a lot of times people get confused because I did a show called Matt Rock, which Andy thought it was a funny name, like Matlock.
Yeah.
And it was Headbangers with all new graphics and a really great direction. In fact, one of the guys, Austin and Redding, who produced the show, went on to do tons of sci-fi and hard stuff.
Wait. For people that don't know,
so I should tell them.
What Headbangers Ball was.
So Headbangers Ball was a show on MTV that was hard rock and metal, and Ricky Rackman had hosted it, and
this is like the height of '80s.
Yeah, '80s hair metal and stuff. So but the thing was, they still wanted a platform for that because they didn't have one for a while.
Yeah.
And I was like, look, I'm versed in all that hard rock. And I obviously loved everything from Soundgarden and Alice in Chains to all old Van Halen. I mean, I just loved rock. I mean, I loved music.
Yeah.
So I was a big guy who loved a lot of, I saw Priest when they had 2 feet, Judas Priest, when they had this table was all the room the 5 guys had to play on a stage at the New York Palladium opening for REO Speedwagon and Stars.
Oh my God.
And I would see all bands. I was always into rock and roll. So it was a perfect thing for me to do because I knew that music as well.
Yeah.
So it was and then at that point bands that were breaking through like Korn and all these other bands and the new metal stuff was happening.
Yep.
But I was in Deftones, but it was very exciting to be able to do both. So it was crazy, Rick, because what ends up happening is I think my TV career is done and radio, right? And then I start getting some calls for because of my relationship with the Seattle bands and stuff, hey, they want you to do the Three-Legged Dog. It wasn't called that yet, but the third Alice in Chains album to do the album special.
Yeah.
And then I was doing the Soundgarden ones for Down on the Upside, and then 17 years later for King Animal.
Yeah.
But I loved doing the album specials and and doing the interviews for those, and then they would be syndicated out or made available to radio. But I thought that all that stuff, there was no more of that. And next thing I know, a couple months go by and I'm there in the music department and they're like, hey, because Lewis didn't want to do the show anymore. He was like, Matt should be doing that show. And it was really kind because Lewis was like, he kept lobbying saying, I don't want to do this. I just want to be behind the scenes. Matt should be doing the show. And eventually he and this guy, Rick Hankey, who produced it, they got their wish and they call me up and they go, you got 3 weeks to do the show. We'll let you know how it goes. And so the first episode is me with Oasis. And that can go wrong or right?
Yeah.
But I had so much fun with Nolan Bonehead that years later I run into Bonehead at the Cat and the Fiddle bar in Los Angeles. And he goes, Matt, it's fucking Bonehead from Oasis. Should I not curse? Because I don't know if this is, should I just?
No, you can say whatever you want.
He goes, Matt, it's Bonehead from Oasis. He comes up to the bar and I'm trying to get served food. I just gotten off a plane. And he goes, Matt, it's fucking Bonehead from Oasis. I go, Bonehead, I wanted to thank you because at one time we were on MTV and you said something about, I was talking about Paul Weller. And he said something, well, I thought with you, maybe it'd be Buddy Holly. And of course, I love Buddy Holly, but he's just making a remark about me being older, just busting my balls. And I wasn't even that much older than him.
Right, exactly.
But I went like this, like I was almost going to slap him.
Yeah.
And they thought that was so funny at MTV. They loved it. That they were like, they literally, after the Oasis interview, they're like, they didn't even wait for the next 2 weeks. They just go, the show is yours. They go, you did such a great job with Oasis. And then it was from that point in 95, I was doing the show until I left MTV the first time. And then was brought back to do the show again in 2011 for a while when they were dipping their foot in
Okay, so
music
what are some things that you remember from doing 120 minutes?
There were so many great, for me, I got to tell you, Rick, it was so exciting for me to always to be on there with so many bands and have the opportunity to expose bands. And like I said earlier, a lot of times the bands would come from England. They'd always be fried because they would go out the night they landed. And then Monday morning, they'd be on there. And 120, 120 and Headbangers Ball, as influential as those shows were, right? They were never their high priorities. It's really funny because the pop was the more of the priority.
Sure.
So they're like, oh, well, there's an artist coming in to shoot for 120 minutes or whatever, or Matt Rock, which was the new name for the new Headbangers. It would be like 7 in the morning or 8 in the morning. I was amazed that these bands would get up and play.
That is amazing.
And these guys, I
didn't know that's when you guys would film that stuff.
Sometimes those live performances, yes, and the interviews.
God.
And I would just go,
oh my God.
It was unbelievable. Like 7 in the morning, 8 in the morning. You got Radiohead out there and Tom York's hitting perfect pitch on High and Dry, and you're like, what is going on, And, But it was beautiful.
Did the bands complain that they had to get? No, they
really didn't, because it was so important to them.
So
they
important.
knew that was, where it was going to make them make or break.
Huge.
So it was really it was an exciting time. That was awesome. And then when Matt Rock, which like I said which was basically Headbanger. So at this point, I'm on Saturday and Sunday nights at midnight for 2 hours, right? And but it was beautiful things like going in the studio, like with Eddie Van Halen, or on the rock side, like going there and Eddie's like, why don't you hang out a little longer? And so we just sat there, me and him in the studio when everybody else left, like the crew. And then we eventually went to dinner. And then what that turned into, you'll appreciate this, is my friend had a tattoo that he got in Desert Storm when he was like a medic in the war that said VH on it, like almost like a prison tattoo, except it's it's in the military. And I made him show it to Eddie. We were having dinner and we were all hanging out, and he goes, and we just came with the idea, and he was talking about like wanting to get engaged to his wife. Mm-hmm. And I think either me or Austin, the guy himself, we just brought up the idea, boy, that'd be so cool if you got engaged on stage at one of their concerts. And and sure enough, they go, we'll do it. And so he got engaged on stage at Madison Square Garden. I go up and speak to the audience in between the encore and the actual set.
Wow. And
I'm on there, and the crowd is, it's obviously an MTV, the people are rock fans, so I get a good response. And then I go, but it's been my friend's dream, my producer Michelle, to always get on stage with Van Halen. So he gets up, and then Eddie and Michael and Anthony pull her on stage, and my friend drops to his knees and proposes to her. And it was just a beautiful moment. But it was so cool. There's those great moments. And also, it's really funny. I always joke about how Eddie had, in the studio, you being a producer and a musician in the studio, he had like the 1/4-inch jack under the toilet paper dispenser, so he could play on the toilet with his guitar. I go, Eddie, and I didn't do this on camera. I go, did you ever write any riffs in there? As I go in there and I notice this jack where he can plug in his guitar.
My God.
And it's wired right into the control room, which is on the other side of the lounge. And I was dying. I mean, that was the funniest thing ever. And I'll tell you another thing that was really interesting about Eddie too is when Eddie had to master one of the records, he mastered it like 50 times. There was a stack of burned CDs there. You know what I mean? That it was a beautiful moment. I mean, to me, that's the beauty of that. The MTV experience was really incredible for me because, that's where I met, David Bowie, who was one of my heroes when I was a kid. And, I'm at a dinner with the MTV music department, and they know that I'm the Bowie guy in the music department, so they put me right in front of him and Amon at this dinner. And I'm nervous. I'm so nervous. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, at this point, I'm still drinking. So I had a Jack and Coke, so I loosened up a little bit. By the end of the dinner, Bowie is like, hey, I'm going out on the road with 9 Inch Nails, but nobody knows that. I wonder about it, because I'm talking about all of these songs and all this stuff, and I had questions about Mick Ronson. I wanted to know about a lot of things and, being in the studio, with doing Ziggy and all these different records. And he, because Matt, I'd love to have your ideas for songs that I could do that aren't singles. I'm not going to do any singles on this tour other than I'm Afraid of Americans at that period of time. And sure enough, I start telling him, well, you should probably do like Minister of the World because of Nirvana. You should do Andy Warhol, STP did it. Or you should do Moon Age Daydreams live. Smashing Pumpkins have done it. And sure enough, I send him a list, I fax it to him, and Andy Schoen always joked about it. He goes, I remember you asking Bowie if he had a fax number. Because, it's like, it's mid-90s. And, it was a beautiful moment. And then years later, of course, for me, it was exciting because when I was doing A&R Columbia, David had a key man clause when the heads of Virgin, Ken and Nancy Berry were let go. And he tapped me on the shoulder one day at CBGB's gallery. And it was right after 9/11. I lost my apartment because I lived 2 blocks from Ground Zero. I just moved back from California working for Jimmy Iovine doing Farm Club and working for Andy again when he was there. And I literally lived 2 blocks from Ground Zero, and we got out of there with I had a daughter who was a year old.
Wait a minute, you were there on that day?
I was there on that morning. Yeah, in fact, I went down on the street starting to walk up John Street towards Broadway when all of a sudden I felt the shaking of the buildings getting ready to come down. So I ran back into the foyer. And I remember because I was in this giant building, apartment building, I just moved there on the 1st. So
11 days later.
11 days later, I'm literally get a call from my father-in-law at the time, and he goes, "Hey, you guys got the news on?" We're like, "No," and then he goes, "Well, how far are you from World Trade?" I go, "It's right out our window." And so sure enough, I walk over and I can see the building from the other side burning, and then I saw the second plane literally coming at there from Jersey, and I just sat there and watched that in horror. And when the second plane hit, because I could see it out my window.
Yeah.
Because even though we were almost 2 blocks down on John, it was like you had a clear view. We were in this corner apartment we just moved into, my wife and baby and I at the time. And we literally, I saw that building, I saw that, and then that was about the time, once the second one hit, that I went down on the street thinking, wait, could I help any people? What could I do?
Yeah.
And I started walking up the street, and then I feel the building shake, like the ground shaking. So I ran back under the floor, and I can remember the guys in the front, were the concierge going, "Don't use the elevators." And I'm like, fuck you. I'm getting back to my wife and kid. Jumped in the elevator, went up, and was with them. And then when the buildings came down, the windows were just covered with, it was like this incredible, first it was this unbelievable, around the whole apartment, because we had windows, like studio windows around the side. So believe it or not, first it was all black soot and debris. And then the second one, because we were on the 30th floor, but that's how bad obviously it was, because it was the Twin Towers. So the first one comes down, it's all black, and then it's all white. So it looks like night, and then it's all that white stuff. So you saw the photos, everybody walking over the Brooklyn Bridge covered in white soot and debris. So I could see that out the window if I went around my apartment and see the people walking towards the Brooklyn Bridge. So they eventually say to us, the second building comes down, it's a repeat. And they say of what happens, the black soot, then the white soot. And I'm just sitting there, I'm numb because I'm worried, how am I getting my baby girl out of here? You know what I mean? That's all I was numb. And I remember, my brother-in-law had worked in the towers. He made his way over to our apartment because he'd gotten to work late, which I'm sure saved him. But we were all there, and then they told us we had to evacuate. So we got out with just a carriage, some baby bottles in it, and formula.
But you're walking through all that.
And we're walking down through
that cloud of all that stuff.
Yeah, it's right now it's down, but it's all still in the air. It's blowing, and it blew in the air for weeks.
Weeks, yeah.
It was unbelievable. So we are walking through these, everybody systematically is walking in one direction, and there's some cars on the side of the road. It looks like Beirut did in the 80s, where people are listening to the radio, and we are actually, we all go and we all settle in the courtyard of the NYU dorms, and there's a supermarket over here, and we stood still because we didn't know whether they're going to blow up, the federal building.
Didn't know what was going on.
We didn't
that
know
day.
anything. Our cell phones weren't working, so we and the next thing you know, luckily, I had lived in a relocation apartment for a couple months when I moved back so I left my SUV up there. And I remember my wife saying to me at the time, "Hey, why don't you bring the car down here?" I'm like, at $400 to park that thing a month, it can stay there for another $200, because it was 2 more weeks. And I was, we're going to keep it up there. I'll bring it down afterwards. Thank God it was there, because we were able to get out of the city that night. We walked from neighborhood to neighborhood and finally got up to where it was from down there with a carriage. We walked through the city.
Oh my gosh.
And they opened the George Washington Bridge and the Midtown Tunnel for 3 hours each only. And because they locked down the Holland and Lincoln Tunnel. Mm-hmm. And we got our SUV, and then we drove, I remember, over the, it's crazy stuff to tell you, Rick. You being a dad, you know this. My daughter was at the Battery Park daycare the week before. Those parents that had kids there that morning didn't know if their kids were alive or dead for 8 hours. And my daughter, we didn't take her that morning because the night before she had an earache. She was holding her ear. And we're we're going to take her to the pediatrician. And I'm an A&R guy, so I don't have to be at work at punch a clock at 10.
That's right.
Let's take her to the doctor, find out why she's crying and holding her ear all night.
Yeah.
So she wasn't, and all those children lived because the women that worked at that daycare in Battery Park put them all on a boat to Jersey City, and they crossed over. But I felt for those parents. I'm like, oh my God, can you imagine? I mean, just felt for everybody, but that was an incredible day, and we ended up driving over the GWB and going back to Jersey because I'm like, hey, if something else is going to happen here, I want to be in the woods where I can run around. I know where everything is, from when you were a kid playing in the woods, riding your bikes, Yeah. But that was a crazy time, and that was we were talking about Bowie, so it was like that was after that I ran into Bowie at the CBGB's gallery, and he said to me, Matt, what are you doing after this? And I said, I'm going to go back to my wife, my wife and my little girl. And my other daughter was horrified because she didn't know if I was alive or dead because she was in school down in Jersey. But I will tell you that this is a few weeks later, and these are like these crazy life-changing moments where you pinch yourself. With artists, because we love, you and I, we love music so much, and it's the beauty of being able to sit here and talk to you about it, is I'm at this, I go for Tony Visconti, the producer, to go see this artist, Christine Young. He calls me and he goes, Matt, can you come to CBU's gallery in the afternoon? And this is like, imagine this is a couple weeks after 9/11, right? Mm-hmm. And, we're back in the city because we had stayed out there for a week. I'd gone through all my storage units. So I get a tap on the shoulder and it's David Bowie. And I'm sitting there and Bowie goes, Matt, how you doing? And he asked me what I thought of like the layoffs at, the heads of his label. And he had a key man clause, which meant that if they left, he was free to go to another record label. Yeah. So he goes like this. He goes, Matt, what are you doing right now? I'm like, I'm just going to go back up to this. I have a relocation apartment temporarily with my wife and kid up on 50th Street. He goes, come have dinner with me. So I go, and I literally get in the back of a town car with Bowie and go to Little Italy, go through the kitchen of this place that he loves, and it's October, so there's a courtyard. It's a few weeks after 9/11, a couple weeks, and we're out there, and he says, Matt, I insist you tell me about your 9/11 story, and he wasn't far either, the whole thing. Then Tony Visconti shows up, the producer, and the artist Christine Young, and Bowie's assistant Coco, and we're sitting there, and he wanted to hear those stories, and this is a couple years after, obviously after, this is 2001. And I told you first about the thing in 1995 when I first had dinner with him in the music department. And we reconnect. And he goes to me, I've been working on a new album. I want you to come to the studio and hear it. And it's the Heathen album, right? Mm-hmm. So I go to Looking Glass Studios, which Philip Glass owned, of course. Yeah. And Tony had the room there. And it was, I go up and I get there. And David's sitting on a couch. By himself in this room, and it's kind of glass, so you can like the green room is like pretty much, it's like it's got windows everywhere. I go in, it's just me and Bowie sitting there, and he goes, Matt, someone, he goes, I got contacted by Interpol. And he's not talking about the band, he's talking about Interpol. Right. Like he goes, they found somebody trying to sell some of my outfits from the Aladdin Sane boat, like Ziggy era. In Portugal, somebody stole these outfits of mine from those tours, and and he looks at me and goes, they're mine, I want them back. I go, yeah, I don't blame you. It's amazing. So the conversation, and then we listened to an initial version of Heathen, and it was just amazing. I'm sitting there with one of my idols, and and I watched him reunite with Mick Rock. Like they hadn't seen each other for a while, so there was this beautiful moment, and Tony Visconti was there, his photographer, Mick Rock. As we know, and what happens is and you'll appreciate this. So I'm an A&R guy, right? And I got a demo deal for a band from Jacksonville. And I go to see Steve Thompson in the studio at the Hit Factory. And I'm like, Steve, because we knew each other. I'm like, you think you produce a demo for me for this band? And he goes, sure, man. He goes, let me hear it or whatever. And he's like mastering a Wu-Tang Iron Lung or Iron Flag. We were talking about Radiohead earlier, My Iron Lung. And he's like, man, he's like working on this record. He mixed it. He's like mastering. And all of a sudden, my cell phone rings. And I'm standing over another board in the corner. I go, hello. He goes, Matt, it's David Bowie. And I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm like almost freeze. I'm like, yeah, David, how are you? He goes, Matt, what are you doing tomorrow afternoon? And I go, we usually have our label meeting lunch at Columbia, like our label meeting for anybody who's like a vice president up or senior director. And I'm like, did I just fucking tell David Bowie that I can't see him tomorrow? I go, what the fuck? And I'm thinking to myself, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? You know, Pinfield? And I'm like, all of a sudden, he goes, well, how's Thursday or Friday for you? And I'm like, David, if you need me tomorrow, I am there. I was like, what an idiot I was. And I go, then all of a sudden he just goes, no, Matt, Friday's good. He goes, I'll send you, the address, car, you want to come. So I went to his place and we sat across from each other on these couches. And it was one of those most beautiful pinch me moments ever. He goes, I want to play the album for you again, and I want to get some ideas on what you thought would be good for remixers or some cool promotional ideas, see what you thought. And here I am with one of my heroes, and I'm sitting across from the couch. His assistant Coco's in the corner. She's controlling the music, playing back the original version of the album. And so it was unbelievable. We're sitting there, and it's like, I'm still like, I have to just go. It's always about keeping your composure, which was like, over the years meeting heroes, like interviewing McCartney or, Townsend, and these people that I love, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Obviously I did the Stones and like, that was unbelievable, so these are all these moments and I have so much gratitude. But I'm sitting there with Bowie and we're talking about things and he looks at me and he goes, Matt, I just want you to know how much I appreciate all your knowledge and love from my music. He goes, it blows me away. And I said, David, I got to tell you, I wouldn't be sitting here right now if it wasn't for you. Because when I discovered Diamond Dogs in '74 when I was a kid, and then I went back and bought Ziggy and all those records, I realized there was a whole other world of music out there.
Wow.
Not just what was being played on the radio.
Yeah.
And I started to really, I was always reaching for anything. I was a sponge as a kid, borrowing everybody's records and, but it was, I got to tell him that, which was a beautiful thing. And so the album finishes. It's the same one we heard in the studio at Looking Glass. And Coco, his assistant, goes, David, I think you should play those other 5 songs for Matt. I go, what 5 songs? So he's, David, he smoked a lot at that period of time.
Oh, yeah.
And so he puts on the Neil Young cover of I've Been Waiting for You. And because I remember things, like I remember extreme details, so I go like this, Rick, I'm like, I look at him and he goes, what do you think, Matt? I go, David, I think you should put it on the album. He goes, it's a Neil Young cover, right? I'm like, yeah, my older sister had this first Neil Young album when I was, growing up. And so he goes out and he has a cigarette, he comes back, he plays Slow Burn, which he got, a Grammy nomination for and all that. And he wasn't gonna put that on the album. He goes, what do you think, Matt? I go, David, I think you should find a way to put this on the album. And Coco's just sitting there playing it, plays me Everyone Says Hi. And so that was another one. I go, David, this is really great. I think you kind of got to reconsider putting this on the album. We get to the 4th song, right? And by this point, he's chain smoking. He's walking out on the balcony, the patio, around the corner, outside, like they're in New York City, and he comes back and he goes, what do you think of this? I go, B-side soundtrack. He goes like this. He goes, he literally, he wipes his brow and goes, and then they played me the 5th one, and he goes, well, what do you think of this? And I go, I would use this as a B-side, and he goes, but it was so funny when he went, after the 3rd song.
Like I didn't totally screw this up.
I was blown away. So Rick, this is the crazy thing. And I always joke with people. I go, I can't take full credit for it, but he put all 3 of those songs on the record. And he took 2 off. He had a song about Uncle Floyd, who was like this guy who was like, not public access, but I think it might have been, there was a kind of this, he took 2 songs off the record and put those 3 on Heathen. It was a beautiful thing. And so when I wrote about it, it was legally vetted by Isolar and his company, and they all said everything was true. And it was unbelievable for me. It was just this, I left there that day. And he knew I was friends with Scott Weiland, and he said, Matt, he goes, I know Weiland's been struggling on off. He goes, if you ever want me to talk to him, if you know that kind of thing. And I didn't see Scott for a little while before I finally got to tell him later.
Yeah.
But But it was like pretty amazing. It was just the most amazing time when I left that day. It was, I mean, I'm sure it's like that for you too sometimes, Rick, because we love these people that we have so much love and respect for, whose music has moved us, whether it's the producers you and I appreciate or these artists. And it's like, I still get, I still think that I'm very, very blessed and lucky to, have interviewed McCartney or, the Stones, when I did McCartney's the special for that one new, and McCartney was the guy, he was one of those guys I was so afraid to meet. And I had already been on MTV and interviewed tons of people, but it was the end of '99. I was getting ready to move to California to do Farm Club, that TV show with Jimmy Iovine and Doug Morris, and and Andy Schoen, and was going to work with Andy again because Andy had left MTV and was GM of Warner Brothers Records for a while. And I remember I got invited to this. Paul's having a party to celebrate Buddy Holly's birthday at Roseland in New York City, and it's like, I go with these two major radio guys, like, Steve Kingston, who ran Z100 and then K-Rock in New York, and hired me there at K-Rock to do work. And then Scott Shannon, who was a DJ in New York, who also was like, did, a lot of oldies and some other top 40 stuff over the years. So I ended up going with those guys, but it was like, I run into a friend who I know from MTV, Bill Flanagan, who used to be one of the editors at Musician Magazine, and he's written books, a lot of books like with U2 and stuff. And he goes to me, "Matt, have you said hi to Paul yet?" I'm like, "No, man, I haven't." I'm like, I don't know. I just saw him walk by and shine this guy. I'm like, and he didn't really shine. Like, it wasn't like it is, but you could tell he has radar. When you're as famous as Paul McCartney, one of the most famous people in the world, and most influential of all time, and one of our all-time lifelong heroes. When you see somebody, I could just see what was happening was as he's walking by the guy was so nervous, and because Paul's dealt with that so much. If you don't have you don't have the cojones to go right up to him and start talking to him. Yeah. So I saw that and I was a little like, so Bill's like, "You haven't said hi to Paul yet?" And over here in the corner, over on the ledge, like Smithereens are playing this party, and there's Dion DiMucci. So I was so psyched. I met Dion and Buddy Holly's widow, Maria Elena, and I met them, and that was like, I remember saying to her, I loved your husband's music and stuff, because I love Buddy Holly since I was a kid when I discovered him, right? But, so I was like, what do I say to Paul McCartney? Like, what can I say?
What's up, Paul?
I go like, what do you say, right? So I walk up, like, Bill's like, go talk to him right now. He looks like he's a little free. I'm like, I go, "Hey, Paul, I just want to say how cool I thought it was that you worked with Elvis Costello, and I love the Eric Stewart, of course, from 10cc and all that stuff." And so he's talking about that. He goes, "Yeah, I love looking on that." And Rick, this is one of the craziest, coolest things ever. Because I love Paul always. So I just, I'm a Beatles. It's the Beatles. And I remember something came over me and I said, "Paul, man, I've always loved you so much, and I want you to know, it used to really irritate me when people in the press were not kind to you over Wings when I was a kid growing up. It used to always piss me off." And I said, anybody who can write a song as beautiful as Here, There, and Everywhere, and as rock and roll metal as Helter Skelter, it's got nothing on you. So, and you know what? He looked at me and he smiled and he laughed. He goes, "I really appreciate that." He goes, "You coming to the party next week? I guess there was some other thing." I'm like, yeah. And I lied. I didn't know what he was talking about, but I just said, "Oh yeah, I'll be there." And I was literally 3 days later flying to LA to move there to do Farm Club. But that beautiful moment of meeting McCartney was just unbelievable. And then years later, I get a phone call to do, when he puts out the album New, to do the radio special for that. And he did a couple interviews, and at the time, I was in that building anyway, the NPR building, because that's where the Grammy meetings were for the Board of Governors of the Grammys. So I served for one term, as an at-large. I'm joking when I was saying to you before about being at-large. It's like the at-large guy for one period for the Grammys, to talk about rock, but also, at MTV, I could talk to anybody. That was what at-large meant being. Like, the different labels could talk to me, but it wasn't like I wasn't their assigned guy, thank God. I'm glad I was the other way. But the McCartney thing was just unbelievable.
You worked in radio, you worked MTV, and then
Yeah.
you were an A&R guy. Okay,
Yeah.
so back in the mid-90s,
Yeah.
what were the stations? If you're a rock band, did you have to be on K-Rock New York, K-Rock LA, and MTV? For a new artist, what is a thing that was like, oh, you're definitely going to get a shot?
Well, the thing was, we certainly kept an eye on how things were doing at radio. And I mean, the medium of video really helped, it was important to a degree. But I mean, you saw how great bands like we're in Georgia right here, and like Collective Soul, how they rose out of doing an independent record. And I loved that, because I loved Collective Soul. I still do.
Yeah.
And I love Ed Roland and those guys. And I loved it. To me, it was one of those things where there were quite a few factors. I mean, I was still doing, by mid-90s, though, when we were doing that, it was, you kept an eye on how things were doing at radio, but if you really believed in something, you could fight for it.
Okay.
Because, like I said, it was that funny story about 311 when I was like, hey, we should give these guys a buzz clip because I'm telling you, they have a groundswell. And, I think at that point, there were before that, it might have been me and Leslie were two of the only people in the early days. And then, of course, 311 blew up. But I remember, I think when Music came out, their first album, it was like I knew that 99X in Atlanta and us in HDG in Asbury Park were definitely all over it. And I remember it because they came there and played for very little money. Somebody told me, he goes, hey, we paid 311. They did it. They played for like 500 and a pizza. I'm like, are you kidding me? I go, how did they get, and
how'd they get a pizza?
Yeah, it was just unbelievable. And but I believed in them. So I would fight for artists I believed in. And it was a very interesting thing. I mean, there was because there were outlets. Again, it was like 120 was one outlet. I got to tell you, the thing that was very interesting about it in general for me, which I loved, Rick, was that I got to be able to program everything. So there were some R&B records and some, every genre. I'd be in those rooms. So when you voted on MTV, when we do the MTV playlist, I'll get the peek behind the scenes is every Monday they would do an acquisitions meeting, which meant we'd watch all the videos that were submitted. Wow. You know what I mean? And
how many videos would that be?
Oh my God, it could be anywhere from like 30 to 50 usually a week. It was insane. And so we would sit there. We'd in the afternoon and watch for hours.
Yeah.
And then we'd sit there and we'd all have like a pad in front of us, a piece of paper, and we would be like, somebody would go, let's do that for 120. That's for Yo MTV Raps. You know what I mean? That's a cool one. This could be played at night. This is that one goes directly. Let's put that directly in Power or whatever it is. And it would kind of be, people would be hedging for their different labels too. That and again, I was the large guy, so I could really vote on anything. But that's what we would do, and it was what an exciting thing to be a part of. I saw these iconic videos come in and from these artists when they're just starting out, and it was just a beautiful thing. And then, the next day on Tuesday, we would have a meeting. It would be all of us, the 10 of us, which included Andy Schoen and Patty and everybody, and Lewis and Kurt and everybody who was part of that group, and we would vote on what would be and sit there and we would hedge. Everybody would be going back and forth. It never got ugly between us. It certainly got ugly between some of the label people, some of the refs. You can only imagine.
If you were to compare MTV getting lobbied by the labels at MTV versus being a program director at a radio station, it's very similar, right?
It's very similar. Yeah, it is. Because there were, at that period...
But they have a lot more online when they've spent the money on the video. Historically, his videos were way more expensive to make.
It was so insane. Do you remember, there was what they would call, for those people watching who don't know what a craft service table is, that would be like the snack table for stuff that people could eat in between, like when there's a meal break. Sometimes they spent more on craft service tables for some videos than they did
on the record.
On the record itself. It was just insane, And
there's so much riding on it when they with these with the video budgets.
Yeah, with that period of time. So people were like, there was a lot of stuff that came down. There was it was really there were some incredible moments where just people would lobby very hard.
There must have been some times when like the head of a label would call.
Oh yeah.
Right. And
Absolutely. He would call that rep or would, talk to his rep and then talk to Andy and then talk to Judy McGrath or Tom Freston, the president and chairman. Sometimes it would go over the heads of like the rest of the bosses and everybody
would they
else.
ever say things like, well, if, you're going to have a hard time getting this other, getting a feature with this, or if you don't.
Oh, they would sometimes do that. And boy, sometimes they'd have some unpopular moments.
Yeah.
Where it was pretty amazing to watch. I mean, because I saw it even in, radio promotion back in the day too, with like, working on alternative and rock stations.
Of course.
Because when I started in, rock and alternative radio, and then the budgets became bigger and they had departments just for rock and just for alternative, you know what I mean? And some that would cross over and work both those sides of things, like alt stations and active rock stations and mainstream rock stations. So
it's amazing. It's really amazing. When you do these music meetings as a program director.
Yeah.
I remember with Leslie, when she would talk about they'd be on Tuesdays or whatever. But people would come in lobby for whatever new single.
Yeah.
Would they say they would come in and say, listen, we got added here. We picked up this many extra spins this week. I really think you should add it.
Well, we definitely get worked that way. Always.
Yeah.
At radio and at MTV.
Yeah.
There was always that kind of thing coming in. And sometimes, they cared about it. And sometimes people would, fight, there were funny times. I remember Lewis, I God rest his soul. He's not with us any longer. But I remember, he would say certain people, we're never going to play that record. And it was like, yes, we are. And it wasn't because it was bad. He just didn't dig it. You know what I mean? Or he didn't like it. You know what I mean? Or something. But, a lot of times, sometimes you couldn't ignore things that were that way. But, I tried, I guess it was funny because when I had a lot of current records when I programmed radio. I played a lot of music because if I really liked it, I wanted to give something a chance, even if it wasn't the major priority of the label.
Yeah.
But, and I'm glad I had the platform to do so. You know what I mean? But it's amazing. But yeah, you would get worked pretty hard sometimes on things. And, I've worked with program directors who were just like, no, that's not right for us. We're not playing it. And, and you had to sometimes say that, Do
you think that the labels really screwed up after Napster and that they should have gone to a streaming model sooner?
I do. It's crazy for me. I got to tell you, as an
Did they talk about that stuff then?
Oh, yeah. I got to tell you, as an A&R guy, I get hired and I'm working at Columbia, and it was, I remember the things they tried to do to stop. We'd send out the new Coheed and Cambria record and they put it on 2 discs as a promo, only for us to find a week later after it's sent out to press people that someone is like, it's being burned 1 billion times, and you just think of how big Eminem's record would have been like on top of how big it already was. That's right. If it wasn't, but I saw how it was directly affected artists and, but I think they should have done it sooner because they were trying to do everything but, and I was,
But did those conversations happen? They must have, right?
Yes, they did. And it was really interesting. I remember somebody saying to me, it might have even been Bill Flanagan, who I mentioned earlier, who had worked at Musician Magazine and written books on U2 and everybody else. And I remember he had written a book called A&R, which actually had like a fictionalized story of something that happened with us in Brazil one time when we were down there to see U2 do their first ever show. And but I remember he was the first person I ever hear saying, there is something coming. It's a black bus where all the music is going to be in one place. First time I ever heard that said while I was still doing A&R. So there was already knowledge that it was going to be coming at some point in time. But I remember the record companies doing everything they could, trying to slow down the inevitable.
One of the labels put some type of
it was
that copy protection or something on it.
That really messed up one of my records.
Yeah.
I had this incredible
was
band.
That? Was it
Acceptance was the band from Seattle.
Okay.
They put it on that record, and the record is brilliant. It's still like, I'll meet young people who go, I love that record. I started a band because of Acceptance, and I love them, and I remember.
Well, what did they put a program on the record?
It was some program, and then it
was illegal too. I think
it was illegal, and then it would like mess up. People couldn't play it, and they couldn't dupe it for their friends. And peer to peer was the excitement of turning your friends onto it. That's what we loved. You know what I mean?
Did you know that they were going to put that on there? And
I did not know they were going to put it on my record, and I was very upset about it.
Yeah.
But like, because I found out about it later, people were like, "Dude, I can't dupe this for my friends," and that kind of thing. And I was like, but that's what music's about, sharing, you know what I mean? It's like, I wanted artists to make a living, of course, but it was like, there had to be another way, but it messed up because my record was one of the guinea pigs for that. I was not happy about it. I was upset about it and found about it afterwards. So yeah.
Why do you think that MTV and VH1, those formats eventually faded? That people's interest in watching videos.
I got to be honest with you. I think the reason that it went away, and it was very upsetting to me. I wish they'd held on to music a little longer, or in the perfect world they would have kept certain hours that were just dedicated to music.
Right.
But when I came in there, they were already starting with reality shows and game shows and stuff. And me, I was not a big reality TV guy. I'm not against that's your cup of tea, but I'm a music person. I love music, and I felt when I found out, I was like, why are they doing less music? And it was because they sell TV ratings are TV advertising is based on projections. So basically, it's okay, well, we've got to sell this many ads, and if we don't get this higher rating, then we have to do makeups for those commercials. And in other words,
so it's really with the advertisers.
It was the advertising that I think, and they were like, well, this stuff gets us tons of views and all that.
The reality shows were really cheap to make too.
Yeah, they were.
Right.
And I was, I was always like, hey, it gave some people a career, but for me, I was like, I wanted writers to have like scripted shows or something real on there. I was not a fan of that because of, I love people that are creative. I love the arts. I want people to be able to act, write, perform. I was not a fan of that. It just wasn't my thing, and music was my hope. Why, what I loved, why I was at MTV and why I wanted to be there in the first place. So it was very disappointing when they gave up on that. But I know there was, here's what it was based on. It was rated on quarter hours. So it got to the point.
What does that mean, quarter hours?
Quarter hours meaning like the advertising dollars and what they did, it was rated by like Nielsen and by these companies, like whatever, kind of like Arbitron used to be for radio.
Yeah.
But it was on the quarter hour, not like on a whole show.
Got it.
So basically it was like, well, I guess their philosophy was, it probably came from up top where the advertising, because it became a dollars game for them, which is not what you and I love. I am like, that's like the opposite of my whole reason I exist and why I love it. What I've done is because of the passion and the care of the music and the artists and the creative people. That's what's the most important. So this is what was the information that passed down to me. I'm like, why did they give up on music? Well, because they were worried that if enough people that had like the ratings meters or the thing on their TV didn't like a certain video that came on at the quarter hour that moved over, or the half hour, I found out later that that's what it was about. That it was really, that was disappointing because, I just wish they had kept at least a certain amount of music programming. I thought that that's what it was based on. And I loved it so much. When I was in the music program department and I was on air and doing all those things, what an incredible platform it was for me to be able to talk about bands. I used to do this thing at the end of 120 minutes in those last years where we wouldn't even tell the bosses, Rick, that we were playing a video at the end of the show. And it would be me going, hey, if you never heard this band from like 1984, you should check out their music. This is their best album. I go, this is like, and I would do this, go on this rant, like at the end
TV.
of the show. It was totally guerrilla on MTV. And it was like 3 minutes to 2 a.m. I would do this thing. And then all of a sudden I'd be talking and then the credits would roll. over some cool thing from the 70s or 80s that I loved that we talked about.
Amazing.
And it was like, that's how some people found out about
When
music.
you made that show
Yeah.
was would you make it over the course of days? Would you put it together?
No, I mean, it was like, the programming was done, like
Yeah.
we,
would you know, like say, okay, these are the things that we're going to do in this order? Was there a?
It was there was thought into all of that.
Okay.
That stuff that was done.
Yeah.
It was done, and a lot of it was a group effort. You know what I mean when it came to all the video stuff. But Kurt Stefik was a big part. We all worked very close. Everybody on it, Louis Sargent, everybody, because even though when he stopped hosting, everybody was involved in it. But it was exciting because you were like, oh God, we're going to debut this video today. We got to do a disclaimer. One of the funniest things ever, and I saw you recently, of course, you had Danny Carey and Maynard on.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'll never forget was because we had the rights and clearances section. I mean, it was when we played the Prodigy Smack My Bitch Up, they were like, you got to do a disclaimer. But the craziest one of all, which is like notorious now, was when I debuted Stinkfist by Tool from Anima. Right?
Yeah.
From Anima. Like, I just literally, I'm sitting there and they're going, you can't say Stinkfist. I go, what? They go, yeah, well, you're not allowed to say Stinkfist on the air. I'm like, oh, okay. So I literally, I debuted the video at the top of the show on 120, and I went like this, like I was smelling my hand. It was the stupidest thing, but it was like, I was like, this song is called, and I went, and then I shook my hand, and it was like really, people were like, because they wouldn't let me say Stinkfist, which was absurd, right? I mean, it was like, you can't say Stinkfist. It was just really silly, but I mean, those are the kind of funny things that, there were certain videos that you never knew with rights and clearances whether or not, they were going to take out, like in some videos, they'd leave a gun in, and in other ones they wouldn't. Or
Right. Would this be a thing where the label would be told that they needed to?
Yeah, they would edit
it.
They would have to do that. They would go back in and do an edit, and
it's not like doing an edit today that you can do in 5 minutes on your computer.
I
back
remember.
then.
Do you remember the Scream video with Janet Jackson and with Michael Jackson? Do you remember that video? It was in black and white. When we got it, it was in color the first time.
Okay.
And then they sent us a version of it in black and white because I think they were concerned at that period of time of the because Michael's skin tone was changing, and I think that the label was concerned about how striking the difference was. I mean, I was there to witness so many crazy things as you can imagine. You know what I mean? Over the years, and it was an incredible education for a guy coming from the media market radio world.
From the Jersey Shore.
Jersey Shore, right? Yeah, it was interesting. But again, it was at that period of time. Again, I was very upset that MTV didn't keep going. And I don't know if I even mentioned this to you, but when MTV2 started, right, it was all videos and all
videos.
music.
Yeah, that's right.
And the only hosts were me, a woman named Jancy Dunn, who wrote for Rolling Stone, and Chris Kosach, who was a radio girl. So the three of us, it wasn't in every market, but we were the first three VJs on the air, and that's all they had. And we just...
That was great.
They would let me riff. I mean, they would just go, and people would come to see, and they didn't want it to look like the MTV studios, Rick, so you would have to... we would shoot in...
Was it the MTV studio?
No, we would shoot in a hat factory. We'd shoot in a basement, like a rat-infested basement of a club in New York City. Krispy Kreme donuts. Like, it was like when they put one in Harlem. Yeah. Hey, we're shooting at Krispy Kreme today. It was hilarious, But it was exciting because I think it was really the boss's reaction to, we're getting so much criticism for all these reality shows and not being all about the music, so we're going to do one all-music channel. And I remember going to introduce Our Lady Peace and Everclear and these bands at the University of North Florida Arena, UNF Arena, because the cable systems that had MTV2 first, we would do things to promote it. And so that was amazing. That was a great time. And, there was, I would always just riff anyway. That was the other thing that was interesting. There were certain guidance scripts, but I mean, I would be there. So MTV2, people would go,
MTV2 is like MTV1 of the 80s.
It was. And so what we would do was they would just have a card with the name of the song on it. And somebody would walk in and watch a shooting and go, how do they fit that many words on that card? And it wasn't. It was the song title. And they're like, holy shit, because I would just riff about this stuff. And because we would only talk about the last half hour.
Right.
Like something we played or what was coming up we were talking about later. It was exciting. It was so much fun. And it was like there was a separate budget for it. It wasn't nearly what it was for regular MTV, but I was very happy and blessed to be on both channels at once. Because first they said to me, hey, Matt, do you have any ideas of who we should get for this channel? And then they were like, we're having trouble finding somebody for MTV2. And then they're like, you're going to do it. So I was like, okay. So at that point in time, I got so busy with On Air that it was like, I was having been in the music department too. I was like I was shooting so much because I was on both channels. But it was a beautiful time because the channel still cared about breaking artists.
Yeah.
And, we loved that we had the platform. But
okay, so Matt, what do you do now?
So I'm still doing radio. So I have, this syndicated show Flashback, which is a rock history show I've been doing for 13 years. In fact, our dear friend Leslie filled in for me while I was out. And she's, she just, thank God she was there for me. I mean, she's always been. She's the best. And then, I do public radio too in California. I'm on the KCSN, which is, it's basically in Northridge there, but people can stream it. So I do an afternoon shift there, which I love because I'm doing and playing stuff from every era. And Ringo Starr just went out and was talking about how much he loves the station. He supports it, whether it's him or Tom Hanks, but these, people that are musical lovers. But Ringo just did a whole thing and talked about how much he loves the station and the DJs. And, and I ran into Ringo recently. He goes, Matt, you look great after the stroke. He goes, and you sound great because I've been listening to you on the air. So that's, that's a good, affirmation from.
And you're doing.
Yeah, and I do KLOS too, which is the rock station in LA. So I just keep going, and I'm looking for more. I'm always looking for more work to do, Rick. I'm one of those guys who just wants to keep busy. I want to, as many platforms as I can to talk about and expose music. And I'm grateful for every single day that I have after nearly losing your life.
Well, the way you've been posting your rehab and everything is amazing. It's really inspiring, and you look great.
I'm grateful to be here, and obviously, it's not a lot, it's no joke that you don't work for 5 months or more. You're going to deal with a major financial hit, and but. There's my friends have been trying to, get something together and to help out. And there's been a lot of people that have been, trying to come up with some ideas for ways to help. And I'm just, again, I'm always looking for, I love doing what we do, Rick. I mean, it's like, that's why I so enjoy watching you talk to and interview people because it's awesome. And watching you, from the time I started watching you playing music and tutorials, I'm like, man, I can't wait to hang out with him. And then when, I found out that you and Leslie had this long-term friendship forever.
Yeah.
I was like, I gotta hang with Rick Beato. I gotta get together with him. So I'm just very grateful, that I'm still there. Every day is a gift, Rick. I realize that, for me, the feeling that I get from songs, from music, that it's the most beautiful thing in the world. I can't, stress more how music has changed and saved my life so many times. It's like, there's the power of song. There's nothing better, and incredible instrumentation, and people that are talented people. It's just, I want to spend the rest of my life celebrating them. You know what I mean? And I consider myself a very blessed individual to have come out of that stroke, and I just. Every day, like I said, little victories, just keep on going. But I just want to keep going.
Well, Matt, I appreciate you coming in and hanging here. I've really been looking forward to this, and I was so happy to hear that you came out of this. And I mean, it's really a miracle.
It is an absolute miracle.
Yeah,
I know every day. There are beautiful things that are written, by listeners and viewers and people that and friends and artists and the collective strength of those people that were praying for me and care about me. I think that just all of that together, somehow Thank God. I mean, I'm just grateful that I'm here and that I'm alive, and that I have to be I live in gratitude every day, and realize what a miracle it is that I'm here, and every day and every breath is a gift, and I want to celebrate it. You know what I mean? Being here,
Amazing,
like,
great,
being positive.
Well, really great to see you in person.
Yeah. Love seeing you, Rick, and hanging out with you. And it was great to be here where I have watched you do so much stuff. It's so great to be here in the
almost
studio.
back in your hometown, close.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
What is it, about an hour and a half, right?
Yeah.
So close.
If no, not even that from
Not
here.
even, yeah. From here, it's probably another 45,
That's right.
Maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love it. I love Athens. And, it's beautiful to be here in Georgia, My mom, I've certainly got the Jersey and Georgia thing in me, and I'm very grateful for that, Which, but Rick, thank you for having me and putting out the word, and it's great to sit here and get to talk to you and about everything, and I love what you do, and I appreciate it, and it means the world to actually get on here to be able to talk to you, and I'm grateful that I lived another day to do so.
Absolutely. So am I.
So
All right.
for having me,
Thanks,
Rick.
Matt. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it. It was great, Rick.